Session 10. Prophet Muhammad, the last and final prophet, the man for the mankind, by ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin with the name of Allah, who is most gracious and tremendously merciful. Nahmaduhu nusalli ala Rasulihil Kareem, and blessings on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the last and the final prophet. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. O my Rabb, open my heart and ease my task. Brothers and sisters, we continue with our subject of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and today in particular, Muhammad, a glimpse. Muhammad, peace be upon him, a glimpse. Israelites were Jews as well as Christians. It was for the blessings of Tawheed, monotheism, and being believers that they had been given superiority, preference, and ascendancy over all other peoples, communities. It was superiority given to the race of Prophet Jacob, called Israel, slave of Allah. It was a superiority given to the race of Prophet Jacob, called Israel, that is slave of Allah, which included Christians too, and not the Jews alone, as commonly understood. Allah had made them knowledgeable, given His scriptures to them, that they call others towards Allah. They were the inheritors of revealed divine guidance and were known to be well acquainted with this source of knowledge. They had created the first bastion of Islam in Jerusalem, and about 4,000 prophets had been raised from among them. The Arab land had confidence in the resounding superiority of knowledge and awaited their response to the call of Prophet, peace be upon him, and Quran to take a decision against or in favor of adopting Islam. The advent of the last prophet of Allah, along with his dominant character traits, had been mentioned both in Bible and Torah. The advent of the last prophet of Allah, along with his dominant character traits, had been mentioned both in Bible and Torah, and they were obviously expecting him to be from the legacy of the prophets, considering prophethood to be the inalienable right. 7 Surah Al-Araf, verse 156, only the translation. I'll write down my mercy for those people who obey the Prophet, the one who is unlettered, the one who is found written, mentioned with them in Torah and Injil, Bible, the Prophet who orders them to do the pious, good, and forbids from the evil deeds, and declares, endorses as halal, legitimate everything for them, and declares haram, forbidden, sinful, those which are dirty, unclean, harmful, and emancipates them from their burdens, loads, things which weighing heavy on them, and the chains, restrictions that had bounded them. That was 7 Surah Al-Araf, verse 156. They recognized Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to be that last predicted prophet as surely as they knew their sons, as the one their prophets and scriptures had enjoined them to believe, obey. But contrary to their hopes and expectations, Prophet Muhammad had been raised from the offsprings of Prophet Ismail, Ismail, the Quraysh of Makkah, and believing him and Quran scared their religious scholars of losing their wealth and also their high perch in the society. Hazrat Abu Huraira Raziyallahu Ta'ala stated that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, had 10 leading scholars of the Jews believed, all the Jews would have believed. Bukhari, Musnad Ahmad, Abu Dawud. I repeat, Hazrat Abu Huraira Raziyallahu Ta'ala stated that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, had 10 leading scholars of the Jews believed, all the Jews would have believed. Bukhari, Musnad Ahmad, Abu Dawud. They simply couldn't digest, reconcile having to sit as the slaves of Prophet Muhammad, shoulder to shoulder with their own one-time inferior followers, with taqwa, fear of Allah being the only merit, with taqwa, fear of Allah being the only merit criteria of distinction. On the other hand, the message of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Quran, was irrefragable, irrefutable. Thus, the religious scholars of the Jews and Christians got divided. A category just few in numbers embraced Islam. A category just few in numbers embraced Islam. A second category, closer to Medina primarily, acceded to the truth and advised their relatives and acquaintances to believe the Prophet, peace be upon him, but abstained from believing themselves. The third category of religious peerage, clergy, outrightly enjoined, forbade their people from believing the Prophet and Quran. Thus, the prejudiced, misguided, ill-motivated clergy turned to be enemies of Islam and the greatest hurdle to prevent their people from becoming true monotheist believers. The religious peerage, leadership of Judaism and Christianity simply watched helplessly as Islam spread into Arabia, then stormed courageously into Africa, Asia, and Europe, breaking the might of the Persian and Roman empires and becoming the domineering religion, adapted by the subjugated, enslaved masses of the world. The clergy then watched the Crusaders being defeated. The clergy then watched the Crusaders being defeated, lacking the requisite force of ideology, having no logic or reasoning to counter. They took recourse to soothing their pent-up vengeance through blasphemy of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which became the pith of their counter-offensive against the faith of Allah. Since 14 centuries in Europe, he is taken as the enemy of humanity, and people and children motivated against him even in the syllabi of schools. Whereas the modern man has trampled, dumped Christianity, is living in a spiritual vacuum, yearning for spiritual satisfaction, looking for a religion, this mendacious propaganda against Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is by far the most potent impeding factor that blocks the Westerners from taking him as the Prophet of Allah and adopting true, pure monotheism, making Quran as the way of life. Islam spread through the sword, and the Prophet had many wives. These are the two main pegs of mendacity. I repeat, Islam spread through sword, and the Prophet had many wives. These were the two main pegs of mendacity. Yet they also say Muhammad, though unlettered, was inspired into producing Quran, the like of which mankind has not been able to produce. But they say it is not a revealed book. They also, Muhammad, though unlettered, was inspired into producing Quran. Yet they all, my apologies. Yet they also say Muhammad, though unlettered, was inspired into producing Quran, the like of which mankind has not been able to produce. But they say it's not a revealed book. Those who know even elementary psychology would recognize that a person given to luxury and sensual pleasures couldn't have lived a life of abject, crucifying poverty and given a book that is proved to be flawless since 14 centuries. If the West, if the West assisted to break, if the West is assisted to break through this mental barrier, if the West is assisted to break through this mental barrier, the entire Western world would adapt the religion brought by him. It is almost midsummer madness not to recognize the sky. It is almost midsummer madness not to recognize the sky. What a pity that mankind has become a victim of shenanigans of the rabbis and priests since 14 centuries. Their saints, religious scholars, haven't the slightest doubt even today that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is actually the last and final prophet of Allah. Their saints, religious scholars, I repeat, haven't the slightest doubt even today that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is actually the last and final prophet of Allah. But they hesitate making a clean breast of it for the fear of losing their perch. But they hesitate making a clean breast of it for the fear of losing their perch. Islamic Dawah would have to focus on this aspect, on the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to make any sizable gains. Muslim scholars have the onus to give a detailed, factual, historically accurate, and discursive picture of the Prophet's life to the West, and to clarify their doubts and remove their inhibitions. I repeat, Muslim scholars have the onus to give a detailed, factual, historically accurate, and discursive picture of the Prophet's life to the West, and clarify their doubts and remove their inhibitions with a great deal of tolerance and patience. Tackling the issues of blasphemy of the Prophet, peace be upon him, through an intellectual, educational approach would be a far more useful strategy than emotional reactions only. Polygamy is as old a human phenomena as man himself, although it appears annoying for certain people today. I repeat, polygamy is as old a human phenomena as man himself, although it appears annoying for certain people today. Though monogamy has created a moral havoc in the society, it has gained currency, relatively speaking, just yesterday, that is around 20th century,